All right, and welcome to the Seeing Ability podcast, where we're having a discussion around the world of persons with disabilities, which means we're going to be talking to parents who are raising kids with special needs. We're going to be talking to some adults who grew up as that kid with special needs, and a lot of people that support this community. It might be medical people, it might be people in education, or people working in the many, many nonprofits that provide services to that community. And that's some of the people I've got with me here today. I'm really excited to have Staci Davis and Gina Wilson with us today. Welcome, ladies.
Hey, thank you.
First of all, I'd be remiss if not, I didn't say that I know when it comes to listening, you've got a lot of choices when it comes to podcasts. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to find a new podcast every week that I like. So we really appreciate you taking your time to listen to us today. Now, I find some and they're like an hour and 15 minutes long. And don't get me wrong, I love them. I got to figure out a time to get them in my schedule. We're intentionally keeping these episodes a little on the short side, somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes. We've gotten great feedback from our listeners that they appreciate that. My biggest challenge is once you hear these ladies and I start talking to them, it's hard to cut it off. So I'm going to do my best to be the time cop today. Before we get into the talking about the world of people with disabilities, we're all people first, right? So I always like to start off every episode with what we call the Fast Four. Now, we're lucky enough the Fast Four is brought to us by the folks at Reliable Tech Help. So for all your tech needs and IT needs, call Reliable Tech Help. They're at 502-797-7399 or reliabletechhelp.com. That's tech with a K, not a CH. So here's the Fast Four. Are you ladies ready?
Ready. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I feel like it's a lightning round. Let's go.
This is a lightning round. We'll go to each one of you. I guess we'll start with Staci, then go to Gina. What is your favorite junk food?
Oh, Twizzlers.
Gina?
Oh, it'd have to be something chocolate.
Something chocolate. Okay, we'll leave it at that. We don't have, if we're looking for any chocolate sponsors, get with me and we can name a brand. All right, Staci, how about your favorite streaming show?
Oh gosh. Right now we're in the middle of Bones. I love any like of those crime series type stuff. Like those just pull me in.
Crime series Bones. Gina, how about you?
Just not watching anything right now, so pass.
Okay, you're going to pass on that. We'll let that go. If we were to get a hold of your playlist, what would be a song that would be on it, Staci?
Anything by the band Joseph.
Okay. Gina?
I'm going to show my age here, but anything by Little River Band.
Little River Band, going classic. I like it. All right. And then last but not least, Staci, if you could just be whisked away today to a vacation destination, what would it be?
Oh, Ireland.
Ireland. You didn't even hesitate on that one. Gina, how about you?
Ireland sounds great, but I'm really needing some beach time. So I'm going to stay in the States and go with Florida.
Florida. Okay. I thought you were going to say an undisclosed location, but you're going somewhere in Florida on a beach.
Oh, I'm not fancy.
I can picture that. Okay. Fantastic. Well, doing a little segue into this world of people with disabilities, it kind of begins for a lot of people with the curveball that you're thrown in life where you really weren't expecting it, sort of that welcome to Holland kind of experience of being a parent. And now you're suddenly a parent, which parenting itself is hard enough. If you want to be humble, just become a parent, right? But now you're thrown this thing of raising a kid with special needs. And there's this journey of acceptance. So Gina, you've got a unique perspective being a parent yourself and then providing services to so many families over the years. You've kind of had your own experience and a front row seat. Tell us a little bit about your journey when it comes to accepting that you were going to be parenting with a little different path.
Well, my husband and I were 24 and 26 when we found out that we were expecting our first child. So kind of on the young side. And you just don't think about it. No one, I don't know, never thought about having a child with a difference. I was focused on more, what's the gender? Is he going to look like me? Is he going to look like dad? You just don't think about it. I didn't know anybody who had a child with a disability, it just never did come. It never did even come to my mind, nor my husband's or anybody in our family. It just wasn't a fear. We just didn't know and didn't consider. Usually babies, Eric has Down syndrome, they're born to older moms anyway. I'm in my mid-20s. My husband's in his mid-20s. So it just never thought about it during the pregnancy. Staci knows this. I'm a little type A. And Of course, I'm going to do this perfectly. Okay, nothing less than perfect. I'm going to be satisfied with. We took all these classes. We had the whole everything planned out, where we're going, the birth, pediatrician lined up, everything's in line. And of course, that first birth was perfect, as it should be. You hear the cry. I've done everything. We've done everything as we had planned. And I get to hold this perfect little baby boy, and he is perfect. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But those big blue eyes already looking up at me, perfection, right?
Right.
And I made my husband go home that night. I said, look, I'm good. Eric's good. Go home and get some sleep. We've got a lot of fun tomorrow. Everybody's so excited. First grandchild, just a really fun time. And so made my husband go home. And then the next morning, 36 years ago, they separated the babies. They put them to the nursery. They took them to the nursery, and I got to sleep all night. Woke up refreshed. Best day of my life, right?
Absolutely.
And so I thought, I need for him to come down here because, of course, nursing is the next thing on my list, and everything has been accomplished so far. So this is the next task to accomplish.
And it sounds like you had a list for sure.
I did have a list. Yes, I did have a list, and I was checking them off. And pick up the phone and call the nursery, and I say, hey, this is Gina. I would like to try to nurse my baby. It's Eric. And the lady said, oh, the baby with Down syndrome?
Wow.
I said, no. I said, Eric Wilson. Yes, ma'am, we'll have him down in a moment. And they hung up. Sitting here in the hospital room by myself because I made John go home. And I'm thinking, idiots. I mean, that's the first thing that came to my mind. What on earth? Why would they say that? Why would someone say that? Did they get our babies mixed up? I better get my baby back in here. And then I'll have to admit that when they brought him in there, started looking. Where did this come from? A few minutes after that, the pediatrician came in and she said, I think we're going to run further tests. And that's when I knew. Called my husband. He's probably 10 miles away. I think he got there in about 7 minutes. Like, what is going on? And we're demanding answers. And of course, back then, well, we got to do this and this. It'll be about a week. But even to this day, it's just giving me heart. I'm having some palpitations here because it feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah. And
I think it happened
36 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Feels like it happened yesterday. I can tell you every little thing that happened, but the idea was in my head. And to me at the time, and I'll be honest, it ruined the best day of my life.
Right.
And I thought, John and I said, well, let's just forget it for now. There's nothing we can do anyway, right? And let's just wait until we know. And we decided together that we weren't going to tell anyone because we didn't want to disappoint them. That's my 25-year-old brain, my people pleaser, 25-year-old brain. I'm not going to mention that because my mom is going to be sad. My sister's going to be sad. My dad finally got him a boy. They're going to be sad, and I'm just going to spare them. So, of course, we found out in a few days that it was positive. And we already knew. By the time the testing came back, we had looked some things up. And I think 36 years ago, we didn't Google anything, right?
Right.
You're not Googling anything. But we got the results back, and then we decided to start telling people. And my parents are like, and John's parents are like, okay, we can do this. We can do this. And they were still doubting it. It's like, look, he's got grandmother's eyes. she's got those little folds on her eyes. Look. And it's like, yeah, she does. But no, it is true. He has Down syndrome. So back then we didn't have the ways to connect with each other. Like now you've got social media and things like that. And this lady stopped by one night. I don't remember her name. And she came in, she said, I have a son with Down syndrome. I got your name from this person, and I didn't know that person. And we couldn't make our connection. We don't know how we connected. And she said, I just want to tell you one thing that I've learned from having a baby with Down syndrome. He's not a Downs baby. Everybody's going to call him that. He's just a baby with Down syndrome. So it was the first time I'd ever heard of person first language, and it wasn't even invented yet. And I just remember when I held him, it was okay. I'd look at him. He's still the most handsome guy around. It was just a beautiful baby. He was my baby. And it was okay when I was holding him. It was just when we were separated, I had just anxiety. So I just kept him in my room from then on, probably the first family they ever did that with. But I just had to have him close.
Yeah. What
Jim,
powerful advice, though, that he's a baby, not a Down
just a baby. Jim, this is a lady who told me, yeah, and then you're going to have another baby, and it's a boy, and he's going to be fine. And Eric's little brother was born 2 years later, which still kind of gives me chill bumps.
Wow. So as you're talking to the families that you serve with Waves, this part, that you just shared it, and thank you for going back and feeling those emotions 36 years later, like it was yesterday. Yeah. This stage, that emotion, those feelings, that not wanting to tell your family, that isolation. What advice do you give your families on how to make it through that stage on to the next one?
It's a little different now, and most of the families we serve have a prenatal diagnosis.
Okay.
So I've talked to many families who are about halfway through their pregnancy, maybe 15, 20 weeks. And it's very different. And another thing that makes a difference in general, and there's no research to back up this statement. So a lot of it too depends on the age of that mom. The younger moms have a harder time with it. The older moms, I don't know, it seems to be easier. It also makes a difference in the birth order of this child. It seems like, if they have neurotypical healthy children, it just seems to be easier, just in general, not all the time. Yeah. But we'll talk about it now. People can Google things, and I tell them not to, because there's some things out there that is not going to apply to you. But just go ahead and inform yourself the best that you can. If the child has a common diagnosis like Down syndrome or autism, I will refer them to some local groups to just get some information. But I said, I don't really need to deal with that. You don't need to deal with that. Just need to work on getting that sweet baby here and not worrying about the diagnosis, right now. Just enjoy him.
You talked about being in the hospital, and regardless of diagnosis, for a lot of our families in this world, there's medical complications, right? And you kind of have this other piece of overwhelm of like doctors and surgeons and procedures and different options. And I talk to a lot of parents who kind of struggle over time. And if you talk to them further down in their journey, they say how they work through the world of medicine is different today than when they first started. Tell us a little bit about your journey of like figuring out how to speak the language of doctors and diagnoses and surgeries and procedures and all this stuff, and how both your experience and, again, translating it to like advice you would give to families on how to navigate being just this onslaught of medicine.
Okay, so my knowledge base there was essentially zero at the time. I did know someone with Down syndrome. He was a friend of mine, a family friend of ours, and we did things together with our family. He wasn't related to me, but he was a friend of my family's. So I knew a little bit about that. So of course the pediatrician says, well, we need to check this, this, and this. And I don't know, I just had a feeling that everything else was okay. He just looked so perfect, you know. It's just we're not going to have to deal with that stuff. And they said there's something, his bilirubin's off. So we actually went home and had to use the little ovens. Now keep in mind, it's 36 years ago. So we called it an easy bake oven, and we had to just roll Eric in and out of the easy bake oven all the time so that he could get these lights to help his bilirubin get back into control. So that was, I'd never heard, none of my friends knew what I was talking about when I said that. And I thought, well, that's kind of different, but it's only for a week. And the hardest part of it was that I couldn't hold him. I could only just stare at him through the little easy bake window. But that was just for a week. So we could do that. And we did that. Still didn't seem right. So for every week, I took him back to the doctor, and my pediatrician said, yeah, blaming everything on the Down syndrome. But it just didn't feel right. My mom's, both of them were there. John's mom, my mom, it's like, well, you know, he'll eat when he's hungry. And a lot of people were telling me that. It's like, no, he's not eating. He's not eating anything. And just having lots of issues. So I took him in for 4 weeks. Every time the pediatrician's like, you know, patting me on the shoulder and saying, it's just a Down syndrome. They're going to do things slower, and send me back home. I got to where I was feeding him with an eyedropper because he could only manage about a drop at a time. So took him in for the 5th week. He's under his birth weight. Obviously, that's all I'm doing is feeding this baby. And the doctor said, I don't know what's wrong with them. I'll meet you in the emergency room in 20 minutes. So within 3 days, he had 2 major surgeries and did also have another birth defect called Hirschsprung's. And like looking back, okay, that wouldn't happen to me today because I would have more confidence. I would know, I would be able to stand up to the doctor better. I think I knew something was wrong. It couldn't be just Down syndrome. So that was pretty tough. So he was a 6-week-old with an ileostomy and a colostomy and a feeding tube. So it's just a lot of, those aren't new words to me now.
Right.
All of this was new. It's like, he's got a what? You know, what is that? What does that look like? Oh, and by the way, you have to manage it before you can take him home. It's like, what? I can't even put a Band-Aid on somebody. Yeah. And it was just, we were bombarded with a lot of terms. And I think in a way it might be easier now. You can look those things up a lot easier than we could back then. Of course, I didn't know anybody who had a baby with Down syndrome with an ileostomy and a colostomy and a feeding tube.
Right.
It was very, very lonely. And all I did was care for him. It was 24/7.
So it sounds like that notion of like listening to your gut and that instinct you have as a parent, knowing your child first. If something feels off, it probably is. I guess number one. The other thing, it sounds like you said, it wouldn't happen today, is just having the ability to ask questions or to maybe get a second opinion, talk to somebody else. That's probably something a lot of people feel like they don't have the right to do, or it's rude to do, or it's inappropriate.
It's rude.
Right. There's kind of that feeling.
I've been doing Down syndrome for 3 days now. He has a doctorate in medicine. Right. He probably knows more than I do. So I did not see that pediatrician again. But it taught me a good lesson. We almost lost Eric through that ordeal because he was a really sick little baby. Yeah. And but I learned. I thought, okay, I can do this. You know. Yeah. Nobody's going to turn me away again, ever.
You talked earlier about finding someone else who has a child with the same diagnosis, about organizations. You hear a lot this idea of like, connect to your village, find your people. That's one of the ways to really get your footing in this world. When you're working with young parents in today's world, fortunately not the 36-year ago world with different resources, but in today's world, what would be like your steps 1 through 3? Like, how do people build that village? It's one thing to say, find your people, but then they're like, great, Jim, but how do I do it?
So if we're talking about a newborn, there's usually a diagnosis there. And I mean, it doesn't even matter where you live, if you're rural or not, you can connect in some way to different groups. Like for us, any baby who has Down syndrome, we will connect them to the local Down Syndrome Association in Middle Tennessee. And they're huge, huge group. They have a committee just to welcome new parents, a committee just to have a baby shower for these new parents, which is the most fun ever. We go every 6 months to that, and we'll have moms there who are expecting. We'll have newborn babies there, and we'll also have babies maybe who had just been adopted or whatever. And then they get the honor of having Eric to be their photographer. He is always the photographer for the event, and his presence seemed to make people happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they can see somebody, they can see a future, right?
Right. It's like, okay, I can do that. They can look at him. Yeah, I can do that. But some of our babies have some really rare complications, but there's lots of resources out there. There's this one like clearinghouse of information out of UK that I send folks to all the time, and they have pages and pages of chromosomal differences on each chromosome. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and I can get lost in that forever. I find it very interesting. So we will usually try to make some sort of connection. I'll even make connections within my families. I've had, we'll see some really rare things more than once, and with proper media release or proper release of information, I can connect those families.
Yeah. So connecting to organizations, because an organization like yours that exists in just about every state.
If it doesn't, we'll take you in here. You don't have to live here.
And social media seems to be, there's a Facebook group for just about every, I've talked to moms that say, gosh, my child has a trach, and if I'm having an issue in the middle of the night, I can connect to my trach mom group.
Right.
So
someone's always awake.
Someone's always awake, especially in that world. Yeah. So building your village, I guess you would start out with organizations, obviously your pediatrician and other resources in your local community. Yeah.
And then like locally, we have a contract here at Waves where we serve babies who have disabilities or delays, and would certainly seek out, what supportive services might benefit your family.
Now, we keep throwing his name around. We talked about him when he was born. We said he's a photographer. For those who have never met him, tell us a little bit about Eric. Like, tell us a few special things that you love about Eric. Well, I'll start with Staci. What tell us about Eric?
Eric's fantastic. He is absolutely the life of the party. We have a podcast at Waves, and he was our original co-host. That's kind of the unique piece of our podcast, is that every episode is co-hosted by an adult that we support. And Eric was our original OG co-host. He loves to learn more about everybody, insert himself into everything. But he really is like the life of the party. Like, I would say like one of the greatest things working at Waves and being able to work with Gina and have Eric come in on a semi-regular basis is that he loves to joke with everybody. And so his favorite joke is he goes to our executive director and fires his mother on a regular basis.
Yeah, weekly I get fired.
Oh my gosh. Well, the month of June is going to be a podcast swap. So I can't wait to be a guest on that podcast and meet the current host that I've had a pleasure of listening to lots of episodes. So Gina, you're a little biased being mom, but you tell us what about Eric?
Well, for better or worse, he's the child that's most like me. He's a little stubborn, and he really is the child who's most like me. He's a go-getter, and he's really competitive. It doesn't matter what it is. He's just going to do his best, and he's going to put his best effort forward. Like Staci and I, what was that thing that we did, that event where we had all these different games, and Eric was out there. It didn't matter what the game was. He wanted to win it.
It was a field day for the Rotary.
That's right. And he was out there, and it's fun. It's fun to watch. So in the process of all that, he has ended up being quite the athlete. He can do anything. He is more athletic than any of the rest of us, including me, dad and his younger siblings. He's a weightlifter, he's a swimmer, he can ski, he can sink 3-pointers. It's just wild. And a lot of that is his attitude.
Yeah. So that day when they said, we'll bring the baby with Down syndrome down, and it kind of like hit you between the eyes, you never really could imagine this guy that you get to love now.
Not in a million years. And I probably lost a lot of time worrying about him and his future. That's what I would tell these families. It's just like, you just don't know. Don't just enjoy this moment, whatever it is, enjoy this moment.
Well, for those who don't know, we've talked a lot about WAVES. So Staci, maybe you start. Gina, you can chime in. Or people that have never heard of your organization, or maybe don't live in Tennessee, tell us a little bit about you guys, what you do, some of the programs you offer.
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit here in Middle Tennessee. We started in 1973, so we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. And we provide support and services to children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our main goal is to help everyone live as independently as possible. And we do that through so many different programs. So Gina is our early learning director, and she's got a great team of early interventionists that are providing developmental therapy to babies below the age of 5, so birth to 5. They're going in there and helping those children meet those milestones. But what the really cool part about their program is that they're working with the child, but they're really helping the parent and the caregiver gain the confidence to be active agents within that developmental process, so that when they do turn 5 and they age out of our program, they have the confidence to continue to help their child develop, regardless of the need for future intervention. And so that's what I absolutely love that program. I think it's amazing. And then we also provide services to adults through residential programming. So we've got 5 homes throughout Williamson County where folks live with staff support 24/7 in the homes with them. And then we also have a semi-independent program. So we've got 2 guys who don't need 24/7 support. They just need periodic drop-ins to make sure they're doing okay and catch a ride wherever they want to go. We have 2-day programs, one in Franklin and one in Fairview. And those programs provide socialization and skill discovery and skill building so that they can be more independent. And then also venturing out into the community to be able to take advantage of all the things that our community does offer. And then we have employment services. So any of our adults that want to get a job, we wrap around and support them in every aspect and every step of the way. Our job coaches are there with them on day 1, shift 1, helping them make sure they've got those skills developed, making sure that they are being challenged in their jobs, because everyone wants to be challenged in their job so that they can continue to grow their skills. Then also serving as an advocate for the employers, because a lot of the employees might be experiencing a work situation with someone with a disability for the first time. So they're there to help advocate for that. So yeah, it's a ton of fun.
I kind of feel like you've answered that question before. That was a pretty good list. And I don't think you took a breath. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
You're pretty awesome. So Gina, tell me, in this early intervention program, what do you love most about the work?
It would have to be watching these parents gain that confidence. I've had some visits I've gone in, especially at first, and all we get are tears. It's really tough. I'll get a lot of, I didn't sign up for this. Why me? Why him? And the best thing is to walk in or get a text and say, hey, you know what we worked on last week? Look at this. And that parent has taught that child to do whatever it is. And it's great. It's great to see the smiles on the child's face, of course, but especially on those parents.
Yeah.
It's the best part.
Yeah. And you can really relate, because obviously you've been that parent, right? And I think you told me that a lot of your staff are in the same position, right? Many of your staff that provide services are parents of kids with special needs themselves. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the state requires a certain education to hold this position. So one of my team members said, well, why don't we advertise this way? So we actually advertised towards the disability groups to bring in applicants for this job. So we ended up with about half of our staff who have children who went through the program, who have delays or special needs. I mean, on our staff of 15, 3 of us have children with Down syndrome.
Wow. Yeah. And that gives you that perspective that
It
like
does.
you just can't get other, what did they say? Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, right? So Staci, tell us a little bit about this summer coming up. What's going on with Waves? Do you have any events coming up? And also, if people want to learn more about you than our limited time today, where can they go to do that?
Yes. We have a lot going on. As I mentioned earlier, it's our 50th anniversary. So we are, and when this podcast releases, we're going to be in the middle of a big campaign. So we're trying to raise $50,000 for our 50th anniversary. So if you are listening and something resonates with you and you want to support programming like us, go to wavesinc.com. We've got a donate button right there on our website where you can support our 50th campaign so that we can continue to support and provide these kind of programs into the next 50 years. We also have a really unique thing that we've started offering through our social media sites. Gina and her team do an excellent job on a daily basis working with those families, but they have so much information that is so important to every parent and caregiver. And they've been providing us with social media content that's specifically for children. And so we created an Instagram account strictly for early learning. And it's called, and you can find us on Instagram at Early Learning Waves, all one word. And we provide weekly tips on different things that our early interventionists see that's timely and pertinent, and it's chunked in sizes that you can really take it in and not be overwhelmed with different topics and stuff. So different things from like, what do you do on a rainy day? How do you entertain your kid? How do you have your child sit properly in a chair? Water play? What does that look like? All kinds of different things. And those come out every week. And honestly, regardless of your child's ability, it's great information.
What a great resource. Thanks for sharing that. So I tend to like to wrap up my episodes with what I call the 3 keys. It's really hard to try to take this whole world and boil it down into 3 pieces of advice, but I'm the host, so I'm going to ask you to do it. So if you're talking to that parent raising a kid with special needs, I'll start with Staci. What are 3 really big keys to success? What advice would you give them?
So I'm not a parent, so this is all from like seeing and observation. But I would say celebrate all the victories because they are all victories. Slow down and just take it all in, and then never assume. As Gina shared, whatever your expectations are, you're probably going to be proven wrong because you don't know what your child can do, and they're capable of so much more than what society and stereotypes tell us. So don't assume anything.
Fantastic. I love those. That's great. Gina, how about you?
Well, because I like to do things my own way, I have 4 key points instead of 3.
Absolutely. I expected nothing less.
And it had to be 4 because just remember my son's name, Eric. Embrace that child. Embrace him from day one and embrace him every day. R, research. Do your research. Do your research on the medical aspect of it, the connection with your village, education, insurance. Do your research. I, involve yourself. I never did ask someone else to do something for my child that I wasn't also willing to do. And that meant coaching, helping at school, whatever that was. And the last one is C. And Staci kind of mentioned this. C is cherish every moment.
Wow. You guys did that pretty well. You're setting a high bar for my next guest. I like that with the 3 keys.
Good.
So You heard some great information today, and our goal, my goal in creating this podcast is really threefold. Number one is to provide some education. Hopefully every episode you're going to get an idea that helps you along this journey. Also a little bit of inspiration and hope. I think in today's world, we could always use a burst of positivity, and then a sense of community. So one of the things we'd love you to do as a listener is help us expand our audience by sharing this episode with those you know. Ask them to, if you haven't done so, go to our Facebook page and like the page, become a follower, and ask other folks to do that. Also, I've started a feature on our Facebook page for the podcast called Touchdown Tuesdays. We mentioned those accomplishments that we want to cherish. Every week, there's going to be a post there, and people have already started leaving their comments about the great thing their kids are doing. If you know another parent that has a child with special needs, let's create a bragging space for them. So go to that Touchdown Tuesday every week at the Facebook page. And again, share this with other people. We know your time is valuable. We appreciate you listening to us. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here today. And we'll see everybody next time. Thanks.
Thanks for having us.